good morning, or good evening, wherever you are when you listen to this. I wanted to share some thoughts that I had on the mat. Now, stick with me, because what's really interesting in what I'm going to say is how I then relate it to nothing to do with yoga. So I was practicing the other morning, and the type of practice that I do, just like in any other yoga class, you are usually standing next to other people and everyone is doing the same kind of poses, more or less. The difference with the kind of practice that I do, which is called Mysore style Ashtanga, is that everyone is actually practicing at their own pace. So it's not led, okay? And then also there will be people who are at the same, let's say, part of the practice as you are. And then there are people who have practiced for maybe much longer and are much further ahead in these series of Ashtanga. And then, of course, there's people who are not really where you are yet. Okay, so everyone's practicing the same thing, but depending on where they're at, that's how they do it. And also, of course, they're doing it at their own pace, as I mentioned. Now, for a long time while I was practicing, I would push very hard, okay? So I would be the person with sweat all around my mat. I am quite pitta, so I will sweat anyway, but this was very, very much. And of course, being in the tropics, it doesn't help. I would sweat a lot, I would pant, really. I would do a lot of heavy breathing. And I would be the person who at the end of the practice did not really wish to sit down and have a nice yoga chat with the other ones, but basically I just wanted to calm myself down, because I really couldn't come down from the practice even with my Shavasana. Anyway, over the years, and it didn't happen like this, I started to shift in how I practice, and I have then now, and when that happened, I'm not really sure, but it probably happened gradually, shifted into another type of practice where my practice is more gentle and the heavy breathing isn't really there, and I do it actually slower. So I remember practicing next to people from some years back and realizing that I was going faster, and then realizing somewhere as well that maybe I didn't need to go that fast, but doing it anyway, of course. So practicing slower, less of the heavy breathing, and less of the extreme sweating, which means that there is something in the way of my holding myself and moving in space that has shifted. And so the other day I was rolling out my mat and I started practicing, as you do, and a person came and rolled out the mat next to me. And even though I was quite focused on myself, of course, now this is the thing as well, you're focused on yourself, but you get very distracted, of course, because there's other people around you and they're doing their thing and whatnot. And so it's really important each time, it's a good practice of realizing that you're somewhere else, just like when you're sitting down meditating and your mind goes somewhere else, and then bringing it back again, bringing it back to the breath, back to your rhythm, because it can be a tendency as well to kind of go into the rhythm of someone else, right? So I came to realize after a moment that the person next to me had a very different way of practicing, very different rhythm to me. Much faster, much more struggling, much more of the panting, just like I've been there, so I know exactly where it is. And there was a tendency, of course, for a second or so to go into that same rhythm, because I know it's familiar to me, but because I was conscious, so I was aware and I was curious about what was happening, I managed to instead come back to my breath and then come back into my own rhythm. And I could feel as I was practicing just how much this person was pushing and struggling and panting. And the thing is, all that I can do in that moment is to be on my own mat and to do my own thing. Because this person, just like me, there's nothing exceptional with me. So this person will also come to the point where something begins to shift at some moment for them. And then they will begin to also realize that they can slow down, or it's just going to happen. It's not so much that I'm going to slow it down. It's just, you're actually just doing it. This is what's really beautiful about it. Okay, now I've been on about this for over 5 minutes. I'm going to stop about the yoga part. What is the most interesting in this is just how this relates to everything else, because there is one thing we have tendency to do with people around us in life that isn't beneficial, and that this example on the mat just shows, because we get upset, frustrated, angry, excited, losing energy over trying to make other people see things the way we do. We try to bring them to where we are at, whether it's a question of them being behind us, and so being frustrated because they're not where we want them to be right now, or even people that are ahead of us and we're frustrated because we are not there yet. Okay, so just like on the mat, it's not going to help me to be focusing on that person who is further ahead, or be frustrated with the person who is panting next to me. It's not going to actually do anything about my practice. Now, you can see that when I talk about the practice. So this is why it's a good example, because it's not always as easy to see when we talk about how we relate to other people. We relate to other people the same way, okay? I will not, on my mat, go up to this person and say, hey, slow down. Because that's not going to help. It will either feel that this person feels embarrassed maybe, or it's almost as if we're shaming them, or we're trying to teach them something, which is not for us to teach them because it's their own lesson to learn. Or we might even actually frustrate them and upset them, and they would ask us to just kindly go back to our own mats, okay? And it's actually the same thing with the people that you have around you in life. Because actually, you cannot make someone see what you're seeing, where you're at on your path. When I roll out my mat in the morning, it's just like when I start my day, okay? I start my day from where I'm at, okay? So the way I will do my first sun salutation will depend on a lot of variables. And those variables are personal and unique to me, depending on what I ate yesterday, depending on how I slept, depending on what's going on in my life and in my personal cycle as well. Men and women have cycle. And it's the same thing with the way I encounter someone else in my day-to-day. We can find this really hard to relate to when I'm saying this. This is why I keep coming back to the example or the metaphor of the practice. We just actually have to let people do their practice the way they do it, because they have to learn the experience of panting, of sweating, of being frustrated with what's happening, so that they progressively start to shift that, which happens naturally. And this is what's very hard to integrate when we haven't experienced it yet. The fact that you will integrate this naturally by yourself, because you know what? You're only facing in one direction, and you're always facing in that direction, which is that you're always moving forward, okay? You are not going backwards. It also shows that with some people that are not yet maybe where we're at, it's easy to fall into their patterns. It's easy to go back into that rhythm of breath that that person has, because we know it so well. And this is also the case with the people that you meet in life. So you meet people in life who are at a place where you have been. Now, you're exhausting yourself trying to bring them to where you want them to be, where you're at, which is apparently very great, which is not going to work. But there's also the fact that you will have the tendency to go back where they are at as well, because you know that place very well. And this is also one of the reasons that we sometimes tend to move towards these people who are not maybe where we're at in life or even further ahead, but where we've been before, because it's so familiar. So we tend to go back to that. But going back to that is not going to help them. It's not going to change where they're at. And it really isn't going to help us, because it means that we're not allowing ourselves to be where we're at with the shift that we have gone through. You can see that once again with the metaphor of the mat. If I have come to this place where I'm much more relaxed and joyful in my practice, and then I'm going to start to push it again, maybe do a little bit what I would have the tendency the other day to do, to go back into the fast pace and the panting, but it's not going to give me anything beneficial. It's not actually going to make me feel good. So that's when I became aware, I became curious about what was going on, and I came back into the present moment and where I was at. So once again, try to use this metaphor for you. And this is where I really would like actually an engagement from your side, because when we share these stories, it's really a growth moment for ourselves. Just the fact of me telling this story is actually me doing it almost more for myself than for you, because it helps me to verbalize and to clarify something, which means that when I'm waking up the next day and stepping onto my mat, starting my day, then having integrated those words, because I'm telling that to you, has already made me shift one step further. So please share with me what your experience is in this. Not necessarily on the mat, you can please share that as well, but more exactly in your day-to-day life, in the relationship with other people. Are you walking your path with meeting people on each side of you who might be further ahead of you, and then you're looking at them and you're being frustrated because you're not there, or behind you and you're kind of falling back into old patterns, or maybe you're losing your energy by trying to bring them forward to be at the same step as you? Let me know.